Hi, in this video we will talk about gathering statistical data. We will talk about what are the appropriate methods, what are the advantages and disadvantages of each methods so that you will have a general idea on what method you are going to use if you are going to gather statistical data. Data gathering. Gathering or collection of data is an important part of statistics because we cannot make statistical analysis without the data. The data that we are going to use will be the basis of our decisions that we are about to make. So it is important that the data that we are going to gather are real data or correct data. And data should be collected in a manner that they are accurate and convenient to use. So it is very important that it is accurate. The data are telling the truth, and for us researchers, we will use the most convenient way to gather data so that we can save time, money, and effort. And collection of data is the first step in conducting study or research because you could not make analysis, you could not make interpretations without the data. And data is important because it is the collection of facts or information. Data sources are very important because this would tell us if the data are genuine or fake. Data sources may be gathered from primary sources or secondary sources. Primary sources of statistical data are data from the government institutions, business agencies, and other organizations. For example, data gathered from Philippine Statistics Office, also known as the PSA, are considered primary data. Information derived from personal interview and questionnaires can also be classified as primary data. So everything that has a first-hand experience is considered as primary source. Your observations, what you have seen, what you have touched, what you have feel, what you have documented, those are considered primary sources. Secondary sources are books, encyclopedia, journals, magazines, and research studies and publications conducted by individuals. So these are the things that you would see or you would read in books or in references that you might also gather that would support the data that you are going to gather. Now, in gathering data, you are highly encouraged to make use of the primary sources or to make use of the first-hand information. The first specific method on how to gather data is the direct method. One method we can do is observation. The researcher sees the situation directly to gather the data, meaning the researcher has a visual contact, a visual information about the thing that he is observing. The researcher may use videotape or audio tape, write down observations as documentations, and this written documents, videotape, and audio tape can be used for review and verification. Investigator is the person who gathers data. So if you are the one who is conducting the observation, you are called investigator, and the person that you are observing is called the subject. Observation methods are usually used in behavioral study concerned with the behavior of either an individual or group of individuals. The data are gathered individually or collectively by means of observation. Observer will record their reactions, responses, and actions to different situations or activities that they are doing. So it is very important that you only document what you have seen. You are not going to make interpretations. You are not going to reason out why they have done those activities. And as much as possible, you are not going to make interventions while you are doing the observation. Some of these are in controlled environment and some are done in natural setting. Some of this, there are instances that there will be situations that the investigator will prepare objects, materials, or activities that they will give to the subject and they will record the reactions, responses of the subject. The subject might be aware or unaware that he or she is being observed. So these are different situations. It is possible that the subject is aware that he is observed all throughout this particular time. The problem with this, according to some experts, the person that is being observed might fake his actions or responses. Unlike if he is unaware, he might do natural things. He might do some actions that he will do if he is alone. And he will control his behavior if he is aware that someone is observing. He might do or not do some things because he is conscious that someone is observing him or her. The second method is the interview method, which means face to face or person to person verbal question and answer conversation. It can also be done through telephone or video conferencing. Interviewer is the person who is gathering data. This is the person who is asking question. Interviewee, the person supplying the data. They are also called respondents. Interviewer may use audio and video recording devices to document conversations because sometimes you cannot catch up writing the answers of your respondents. So that is why audio and video conferencing devices or the video recordings are very helpful, especially when you are going to present it in tabular or graphical data. Interviewer must prepare sets of questions in advance, and you can actually share the question to your interviewee so that he can prepare his answer, because there are some individuals who will experience mental block if they are going to receive impromptu questions, so they cannot think properly. That is why some interviewer will share the question in advance to the respondent so that they will have confidence and they will have an idea on what to say. Interview method is appropriate if the information needed is minimal and the number of respondents are few, let us say less than 30. Though there are some experts who are saying that interview method is only good for 5 to 10 respondents. Some are doing one-to-one interview, some are doing conference like or roundtable discussions. Interview becomes very costly and time consuming if respondents are very large in number and living far apart. One advantage of this interview method is you can ask further questions for clarifications. However, the disadvantage of this is the person that you are asking may not be available. That's why it is time consuming. And whether you like it or not, this is time consuming to transcribe the data. The second method is indirect method. So you can use this if you cannot access your respondents face to face, or if you want to save time, if you want to gather the information in a single period of time. And we are going to use questionnaire. This is a well-prepared printed list of questions that are used with or without the presence of the researcher. So you can ask the help of your friends or your co-teachers to help them distribute the questions. And it can be mailed or handed personally to them. And you can also send this electronically aside from paper-based. This method can save a lot of time and money in gathering needed information because questionnaire can be given to a large number of respondents at the same time. So for example, your respondents are your students in a class. So if you have 40 students in the class, you will just distribute the questionnaires and you will wait for them to answer and submit the questionnaires after a certain period of time. So that is one advantage of questionnaire because you can gather data in a short period of time. And you can also ask help from your friends or your co-teachers that you give your questionnaire to your respondents. But that is also a disadvantage because the researcher cannot expect all distributed questionnaires will be retrieved because some will ignore it. So if you give it to your co-teacher might forget it to distribute it to his or her students. And aside from that, some items will not be answered because they did not understand, especially if the researcher is not around. And questionnaires is also expensive if the respondents are very large because you have to reproduce a large amount of copies. Some researchers need to provide meals to gather respondents in a single setting. So there are instances that you are going to give them meals or snacks so that they will answer your questions because they will not answer it, they will ignore it because they would feel it is unimportant. They will not be rewarded after answering. So that is why it is an additional expenses for you to provide them meals, or some are in a form of gifts. And researcher must produce more than the expected number of responses because some of them might lost it, some of them might misplaced it, or there are instances that you need to replace your respondent because he is not doing his responsibility as a respondent, so you have to replace him. The third one is the registration method. This method of data gathering is perhaps the most reliable because this is enforced and governed by law. For example, birth and death rates are registered in the Philippine Statistics Office. The number of cars can be found in the LTO. The list of registered voters in the Philippines is found in the COMELEC. Students' record in the registrar's office, in the Department of Education, or in the Commission in Higher Education. You can also gather data in certain events such as sports events, in a webinar, conferences by looking into the registration form. However, there is a certain process and there are multiple restrictions that needs to be observed in gathering and collecting information because you might think this is reliable and this is very easy. There are certain ways you need to undergo to receive copies of this data because there are sensitive information about the person. So for example, about this LTO, about this data in the PSA, about the records in the registrar, DepEd, or CHED, because you can use this in bad things. No? You can use this in other things aside from your main purpose of doing research. At present, we have the data privacy law, which hinders to collect and share sensitive information for privacy and security reasons. The fourth method is the experiment method. The physicists, chemists, scientists, and researchers makes use of experiment method in gathering data. They are usually conducting experiments inside the laboratory or controlled environment. This method is usually used to find out cause and effect. For example, an agriculturist would like to know the effect of a new brand of fertilizer on the growth of plants. The new kind of fertilizer will be applied to 10 sets of plants, while other 10 sets of plants will be given by the ordinary fertilizer. The growth of plants will be compared to determine which fertilizer is better. The fifth method to gather data is the test method. This is widely used in psychological researches. They are using standardized tests because of their validity, reliability, and usability. Examples of tests may include aptitude test, IQ test, and achievement test. Educational studies also use self-made achievement tests, or these are the teacher-made tests, to measure the learning gains, difficulties, and gaps of the students that needs remedial instructions. And this is also used to measure if the instructional materials are effective or functional. And there are also practical exams to measure the levels of performance and proficiency based on standards. There are massive multiple wide variety of data available that we can access anywhere and anytime. We just have to use the appropriate gathering strategy to get the desired genuine information that is convenient for the researcher. There are ethical behaviors that needs to be observed in gathering and handling data. Respondents' identity must be kept private and protected. That would be all for today. I hope you learned something. Bye bye.